In the gleaming high-rise office of the Chen Hotel group, Michael Chen stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows, gazing at the cityscape below. The morning sun cast long shadows across his minimalist office, highlighting the many awards and accolades that decorated the walls. "Another complaint about discriminatory treatment?" he muttered, scanning the email on his phone. His fingers drummed against the polished mahogany desk, a habit he developed during moments of deep thought. The allegations were troubling. Wealthy guests receiving preferential treatment, while others were subtly dismissed or ignored. "Mr. Chen," his assistant Sarah interrupted. "The board meeting starts in 5 minutes." Michael nodded, but his mind was elsewhere. For years, he'd built his hotel empire on the promise of exceptional service for all guests. How had things gone so wrong under his watch? Later that evening, as the office emptied and the city lights began to twinkle, Michael remained at his desk pondering. "I need to see it for myself," he finally decided, speaking to the empty room. The plan formed quickly in his mind. He would go undercover as a regular employee. Using his connections, Michael crafted a new identity: Mark Zhang, a 35-year-old with basic hospitality experience. The transformation began immediately. Gone were the tailored suits, replaced by off-the-rack jeans and simple button-downs. His designer watch was exchanged for a basic timepiece. Even his carefully styled hair was allowed to fall naturally. The morning he walked into his own hotel as Mark, nobody gave him a second glance. "You must be the new hire," the HR manager said, barely looking up from her computer. The orientation was brief and impersonal. "Here's your uniform, locker assignment, and schedule. You start with housekeeping." In the employee locker room, Michael, now Mark, changed into the standard issue uniform. The fabric was scratchy, nothing like the fine materials he was used to. His first shock came during the morning staff meeting. Employees stood for 40 minutes, no chairs provided. The supervisor's tone was curt, almost dismissive. "Remember, we have VIP guests in rooms 2103 and 2104. They get priority attention." Michael felt his jaw tighten at the explicit instruction to prioritize certain guests. His first day of actual work was a humbling experience. Pushing heavy cleaning carts down endless corridors, scrubbing bathrooms until his hands were raw, dealing with demanding guests who looked through him as if he were invisible. By lunch break, his back ached and his feet throbbed. In the cramped staff cafeteria, he sat alone, observing. That's when he first saw her, Emma Foster. She moved through the room with an easy grace, greeting everyone with a genuine smile. Her uniform was slightly worn, but impeccably clean. Even the tired lines around her eyes couldn't dim her natural warmth. "Mind if I join you?" she asked, setting her tray down. Her smile reached her eyes, something Michael hadn't seen much of in his executive circles. "I'm Emma. You must be new. I know pretty much everyone here." "Mark," he replied, surprised by how natural the lie felt. "First day," he added, gesturing to his already stained uniform. Emma laughed, a sound that seemed to brighten the dingy break room. "Don't worry, we all started somewhere. Tomorrow will be easier." As they talked, Michael found himself drawn to her authentic nature. She spoke about the hotel with genuine pride, despite her position. When she mentioned her son Tommy, her whole face lit up. "He's 5, and he thinks the hotel is a castle where his mom works as a princess." Michael couldn't remember the last time he'd had such an honest conversation. That evening, as he drove home to his luxury apartment, Michael felt different. His muscles ached, but his mind was clearer than it had been in years. He looked at his reflection in the elevator mirrors. Mark looked back at him. This experiment was already showing him things he never expected to see. And somehow, he knew Emma Foster would be key to understanding what his hotel had become. As he drifted off to sleep that night, her laugh echoed in his memory. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but for the first time in years, Michael Chen was looking forward to going to work. Even if it meant scrubbing more toilets as Mark Zhang. The game of deception had begun, but he never expected it would lead to the most honest connection of his life. The next few days revealed more about the hotel's inner workings than any executive report ever could. Michael discovered that the morning rush was particularly challenging for the housekeeping staff. "We're always understaffed between 7 and 9, Emma explained as they hurried through their tasks. Her movements were efficient, each motion perfected through countless repetitions. The executive team thinks we're fully staffed, but they don't see how many people call out sick from exhaustion. Michael felt a pang of guilt. He was that executive team. Throughout the week, he witnessed countless small injustices. The broken staff elevator that had been scheduled for repair for months. The faulty time clock that often failed to register clock-ins, causing payroll disputes. The inadequate cleaning supplies that made their jobs twice as hard. But what struck him most was Emma's resilience. Despite every challenge, she maintained her optimistic spirit. "Someone's having a worse day than me," she would say, straightening her worn name tag. One morning, they were assigned to clean the presidential suite. As they entered the opulent space, Michael remembered personally selecting every piece of furniture. "Beautiful, isn't it?" Emma said, running her hand along the marble countertop. "Sometimes, when I clean in here, I imagine what it would be like to stay in a place like this." Her words hit Michael like a physical blow. This was his world. Yet to her, it was an unattainable dream. "Do you ever wish for more?" he asked, watching her methodically make the king-size bed. Emma paused, smoothing a wrinkle from the Egyptian cotton sheets. "Of course I do, especially for Tommy's sake." Her voice grew softer as she continued working. "But wishes don't pay the bills or put food on the table." "What about advancement opportunities?" Michael probed, knowing the hotel had programs in place. Emma's laugh held a touch of bitterness this time. "Those are for people with connections or degrees, not single moms who barely finished high school." Each word was another indictment of the system he'd created. Later that afternoon, they encountered James, the hotel manager. His expensive suit and imperious manner seemed even more offensive from this new perspective. "The VIP in 1801 complained about slow service," James announced, his tone dripping with contempt. "Foster, Zhang. Make sure it doesn't happen again." Emma's shoulders tensed, but her voice remained professional. "Yes, Mr. Phillips. We'll take care of it right away." As James walked away, Michael noticed Emma's hands trembling slightly. "He's always like that," she said, forcing a smile. "Some people need to make others feel small to feel big themselves." That evening, as Michael prepared to leave, he heard Emma on the phone. "I'm sorry, baby. Mommy has to work late again." She was fighting back tears as she spoke. "I promise I'll be there to tuck you in, Tommy. Just a little longer." Michael stood in the shadows, watching her compose herself. In that moment, he realized his experiment was showing him more than just operational flaws. It was revealing the human cost of his disconnected leadership. As he drove home that night, past the gleaming towers of his hotel empire, Michael Chen, billionaire hotelier, felt smaller than Mark Zhang, humble housekeeper. Because Mark Zhang had learned more about real leadership from Emma Foster in 1 week than Michael Chen had learned in 15 years of running hotels. The deception weighed heavily on his conscience now. But something told him this journey was just beginning. And Emma's honest smile had somehow become his compass in this unfamiliar territory. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and revelations. But for now, Michael lay awake, haunted by Emma's words about wishes and reality, knowing that soon, he would have to decide between protecting his lie and protecting the woman who was unknowingly teaching him how to be human again. The game of pretense had taken an unexpected turn, and Michael Chen was no longer sure who was really learning from whom. The following days brought even more eye-opening experiences for Michael in his role as Mark. One particularly busy morning, he witnessed Emma handling a difficult situation with remarkable grace. A wealthy guest was berating her over a minor housekeeping delay. "Do you know how much I'm paying to stay here?" the man demanded, his face red with anger. Emma stood calmly, hands folded in front of her uniform. "I sincerely apologize for the inconvenience, sir. I'll personally ensure your room is serviced immediately." Michael watched from nearby, fighting the urge to intervene. The guest continued his tirade, but Emma remained professional and composed. After the guest stormed off, Michael approached her. "How do you stay so calm in situations like that?" Emma's smile held a hint of sadness. "When you've been doing this job as long as I have, you learn that anger usually masks something else." She adjusted her name tag, a nervous habit Michael had noticed. "Besides, getting upset doesn't solve anything. It just makes everyone's day worse." Later that afternoon, they shared a quick break in the staff room. Emma pulled out a slightly crumpled photo from her pocket. This is why I do it, she said, showing Michael a picture of Tommy. The boy's smile was identical to his mother's, bright and genuine. He wants to be a superhero when he grows up, she laughed softly. Sometimes I feel like I'm failing him by not being able to give him more. Michael felt his chest tighten at her words. Here was a woman working tirelessly, yet still feeling inadequate. You're his hero already, he found himself saying. Emma's eyes met his, surprised by the sincerity in his voice. Their moment was interrupted by James's sharp voice over the radio. All available housekeeping staff to the conference level. Now! As they hurried to respond, Michael noticed Emma's slight limp. Are you okay? He asked, concerned. Just tired, she replied, quickening her pace despite the pain. These shoes aren't exactly orthopedic, but they're what I can afford. Another stark reminder of the daily struggles he'd been blind to. That evening, as they finished their shift, Emma received a call. Tommy's after-school program was closing early due to a power outage. I can't leave now, she said, panic creeping into her voice. We still have 3 rooms to finish, and James will write me up if I go. Without hesitation, Michael spoke up. Go get Tommy. I'll cover for you here. Emma hesitated, torn between necessity and duty. Are you sure? You could get in trouble. Some things are more important than the job, he assured her. As she rushed off with grateful tears in her eyes, Michael felt something shift inside him. For the first time in years, he'd acted purely from his heart, not his business sense. Cleaning those last rooms alone, he thought about Emma and Tommy, about all the employees struggling to balance work and family, about how his pursuit of profit had created a system that forced impossible choices. When he finally left the hotel that night, his decision was made. Things needed to change, and he would be the one to change them. But first, he needed to understand more, to learn from Emma's strength, her dignity, her unwavering spirit, even if it meant continuing the charade a little longer. Because somehow, in just a few days, this remarkable woman had begun to tear down walls. Walls he'd spent years building around his heart. And for the first time since starting this undercover journey, Michael Chen wasn't sure who was really going to be transformed by the end. The teacher or the student, the executive or the housekeeper, the man behind the mask or the woman who made him want to remove it. As the first week drew to a close, Michael found himself standing in the executive parking garage. His Ferrari waited in its reserved spot, a stark reminder of his double life. Yet he chose to walk home instead, his mind replaying moments from the past few days. The evening air was thick with possibility and guilt. His phone buzzed, another board meeting reminder for Monday. Mr. Chen, please confirm your attendance, the text read. He smiled wryly, thinking of his other identity's weekend cleaning schedule. At a crosswalk, he watched a mother and son walking hand in hand. The boy skipped along, reminding him of Tommy's photo in Emma's locker. That simple image had affected him more than any quarterly report ever had. Inside his penthouse apartment, Michael stood before his wall of mirrors. Who are you really? He asked his reflection. Mark Zhang's humble demeanor seemed to fit him better now than his tailored suits. He thought about Emma's words from earlier that day. Sometimes the smallest kindness can change someone's whole world. She'd said it while helping an elderly guest find her glasses. Such a simple act, yet the genuine gratitude in the guest's eyes was unforgettable. His phone rang. It was James, the hotel manager. Mr. Chen, I have concerns about some of the new hires. Michael let him ramble, each complaint now viewed through new eyes. I'll address it next week, he said finally, ending the call. Next week seemed a lifetime away. Tomorrow, he'd be back as Mark, pushing cleaning carts alongside Emma, learning more about real service than any luxury management course could teach. In his home office, he pulled up the hotel's employee policies. Each page now read differently, highlighted by his experiences on the ground. The efficient staffing models suddenly looked like what they were: understaffing. Streamlined service protocols translated to unrealistic workloads. He began making notes, his businessman's mind finally aligning with his awakening heart. His security system pinged, showing the night view of his private elevator. The empty corridor reminded him of the hotel's service hallways, where Emma and countless others worked tirelessly, invisible to the guests they served. A text message lit up his phone from his sister Claire. You seem different this week. Everything okay? He typed back, "Never better. J. UST, seeing things clearly for the first time. As midnight approached, Michael stood on his balcony. Below, his hotel's famous logo illuminated the skyline. But now he saw beyond the glitter and glamour, to the hearts beating within those walls, the dreams waiting to be recognized, the potential waiting to be unleashed, and one particular smile that had begun to mean more than all his success. Time to make it right, he whispered to the night air, knowing that tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities to learn from Emma's quiet strength, new chances to bridge the gap between Mark and Michael, between what he was and what he could become. The game of deception had evolved into something deeper, a journey of transformation that would change not just his hotel, but his very understanding of what truly matters in life. As he finally prepared for bed, Michael Chen smiled. Because tomorrow, Mark Zhang would return to work, ready to learn more about service, humanity, and the power of honest connections, even if that honesty was built on a necessary lie. The first chapter of his transformation was ending, but the real story was just beginning. And somehow, Emma Foster had become both his teacher and his test, in ways that would soon challenge everything he thought he knew about success, love, and truth. The second week of Michael's undercover journey brought unexpected revelations and deepening connections. Monday morning found him arriving early, his designer watch now permanently replaced by a modest timepiece. The employee entrance felt more familiar than his private elevator ever had. Emma was already there, arranging supplies on her cleaning cart. "Good morning, Mark," she called out, her smile brightening the dim corridor. He noticed dark circles under her eyes, barely concealed by makeup. "Rough weekend?" he asked, helping her organize the cleaning supplies. Emma sighed, her usual energy somewhat diminished. Tommy had a fever. Spent most of Saturday night in the emergency room. Michael felt his heart clench at the worry in her voice. "Is he okay now?" "Better. But medical bills." She trailed off, straightening her uniform. The implied struggle hung heavy in the air between them. As they worked through their morning rounds, Michael observed Emma more closely. Despite her exhaustion, she maintained her professional demeanor. Each guest interaction was handled with genuine care and attention. "You make this look effortless," he commented during their break. Emma laughed softly, stirring her budget instant coffee. "Nothing about this job is effortless, Mark. But complaining doesn't help." She pulled out Tommy's photo, now slightly more wrinkled. "Besides, someone's counting on me to be strong." Michael found himself sharing more of his own carefully edited story. "I used to work in finance," he said, building on his cover story. "Lost everything in a market cross. Had to start over." Emma's eyes softened with empathy rather than pity. "Sometimes starting over is a blessing in disguise," she offered. "It teaches you what really matters." Their conversation was interrupted by James's sharp voice over the radio. "Foster, the guest in 2103 needs immediate assistance." Emma quickly gathered her supplies, but Michael noticed her wince. "Your feet still bothering you?" She tried to wave off his concern. "Just part of the job. Can't afford new shoes until next payday." Without thinking, Michael spoke up. "Let me help. I have some savings." Emma's expression immediately closed off. "That's very kind, Mark, but I can't accept money from coworkers." Her dignity, even in hardship, touched something deep in Michael's soul. "You're right. I'm sorry if I overstepped." She softened again, touching his arm briefly. "You're sweet to offer, but some battles we have to fight alone." As they resumed their work, Michael's mind raced with possibilities. Ways he could help without compromising his cover. Or more importantly, without compromising Emma's pride. The day continued, filled with small moments that revealed Emma's character. Her gentle handling of an elderly guest's confusion. The way she remembered every regular guest's preferences. How she quietly gave half her lunch to a newer employee who had forgotten his. By evening, Michael had learned more about true service than any business school could teach. But he'd also learned something far more valuable. About the quiet strength that comes from facing life's challenges with grace. As they prepared to clock out, Emma received another call from home. Tommy's fever had returned, and the babysitter was worried. Without hesitation, Michael spoke up. "Go. I'll cover the rest of your rooms." This time, Emma didn't argue. The gratitude in her eyes said more than words could express. As he watched her hurry away, Michael Chen felt something shift in his heart. The line between his two identities was beginning to blur. And somehow, Emma Foster was becoming more than just part of his investigation. She was becoming the mirror in which he saw his own humanity reflected. The question was, how long could he maintain this deception, when the truth would surely shatter the very connection he'd come to treasure? That night, as Michael cleaned the remaining rooms, his thoughts kept returning to Emma. The weight of his deception felt heavier with each passing moment. In the quiet of an empty suite, he found himself face to face with his own reflection. The man staring back was neither fully Michael Chen nor completely Mark Zhang. His phone buzzed, a message from his executive assistant. Board members requesting urgent meeting about Q3 projections. The corporate world seemed increasingly distant, like a fading dream. Later that evening, he made an unexpected decision. Instead of returning to his penthouse, he drove to the hospital Emma had mentioned. The emergency room was crowded, filled with worried faces and quiet desperation. He spotted them immediately, Emma cradling a sleeping Tommy in the waiting area, her uniform still on, her exhaustion visible even from a distance. "Mark?" Her surprise was evident as he approached. I thought you might need some support," he offered quietly. Tommy stirred slightly, his small face flushed with fever. "You didn't have to come," Emma whispered, but her eyes told a different story. Michael sat beside them, watching the night unfold. He witnessed Emma's gentle mothering, her quiet strength, the way she soothed Tommy's fears with soft words and tender touches. Hours passed in the sterile fluorescent light. When the doctor finally saw them, Michael waited outside, his mind racing with thoughts of healthcare benefits and employee insurance policies. Policies he now realized were woefully inadequate. Around midnight, they emerged, Tommy's fever finally breaking. "Let me drive you home," Michael offered, seeing Emma's exhaustion. She hesitated, then nodded gratefully. Their drive through the quiet city streets felt intimate, meaningful. Tommy slept in the back seat, while Emma gave quiet directions. Her apartment building was in a modest neighborhood, far from the luxury he knew. "Thank you, Mark," she said softly as they arrived. "Not just for the ride, for being there." Something in her voice made his heart skip a beat. "That's what friends are for," he replied, the word friends tasting bittersweet. As he watched them disappear into the building, Michael made another decision. Tomorrow, he would begin implementing changes, small ones at first but meaningful, because tonight had shown him the real cost of corporate efficiency. It was measured not in dollars, but in the struggles of people like Emma, people who deserved so much more than they were given. The drive back to his penthouse felt longer than usual, each mile widening the gap between his two worlds. Yet somehow, sitting in that hospital waiting room, he'd felt more authentic than he had in years. The question was, could Michael Chen become worthy of the trust Emma Foster placed in Mark Zhang? Only time would tell. But one thing was certain, there would be no going back to the man he was before he met her, before he learned what true strength looked like. In the quiet dignity of a single mother, fighting her battles with grace and unwavering hope. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but tonight had changed everything, in ways that would ripple through both their lives, like waves on a pond, touching shores yet unseen. The next morning brought subtle but significant changes to their dynamic. Something had shifted during those quiet hours in the hospital. Emma's usual professional distance had softened slightly. Michael found himself sharing more genuine parts of himself, carefully, masked within Mark's story. "I used to think success was measured by numbers," he told her during their morning break. "Now I'm not so sure anymore." Emma studied him over her coffee cup, her eyes thoughtful. "What changed your mind?" "Meeting people like you," he answered honestly. "Seeing how you measure success differently." Tommy had recovered enough to return to school that morning. He insisted on wearing his superhero backpack. Emma shared, showing him a photo. "Says it gives him special powers to fight off germs." Her smile when speaking about Tommy lit up the dreary break room. Michael found himself increasingly drawn to these glimpses of her personal life. The way she packed an extra sandwich every day, just in case someone needed it. How she remembered every housekeeper's birthday, bringing small homemade treats. The gentle way she handled new employees' mistakes, offering guidance instead of criticism. During their afternoon rounds, they encountered a particularly difficult situation. A wealthy guest was berating a young housekeeper over a minor oversight. Before Michael could intervene, Emma stepped in. Her approach was masterful, calm, professional, yet firmly protective of her colleague. "I admire how you handle these situations," he said afterward. Emma's response revealed layers of hard-earned wisdom. People who feel the need to put others down are usually fighting their own battles. We just happen to be convenient targets. As they worked together, Michael noticed more subtle details about Emma. The way she hummed softly while making beds. How she always arranged bathroom amenities with artistic precision. The small notebook she carried, filled with guest preferences and special requests. "It helps me remember the little things," she explained when he asked. "Sometimes those matter more than the big ones." During their lunch break, she shared more about her dreams. "I've always wanted to study hospitality management," she admitted. "But between work and Tommy, there's never enough time or money." Michael felt the weight of his secret identity more heavily than ever, knowing he had the power to help, yet unable to reveal himself. The afternoon brought a surprise visit from James, the manager. His inspection was particularly harsh, targeting Emma's section specifically. Michael watched her maintain her composure under the scrutiny, but he caught the slight trembling of her hands as she reorganized her cart afterward. "Don't let him get to you," he offered, helping her refold towels. Emma's smile was tired but genuine. "Some days are harder than others," she admitted, "but tomorrow's always a new chance to do better." As their shift ended, Michael realized something profound. Emma Foster wasn't just teaching him about hotel operations. She was teaching him about resilience, dignity, and grace under pressure. Qualities that no amount of money could buy. And somewhere between the morning coffee and evening goodbyes, he was learning that success might look very different than what he'd always believed it to be. The question was, would this understanding come at the cost of losing the very person who helped him find it? The weeks in brought unexpected moments that would reshape their relationship forever. Friday morning arrived with a gentle rain, matching Michael's contemplative mood. He found Emma in the break room, earlier than usual, writing in her small notebook. "Morning," she said, quickly closing the book, but not before he glimpsed drawings inside. "I didn't know you were an artist," he commented, settling beside her. Emma's cheeks colored slightly as she tucked the notebook away. "Just sketches, really. Ideas for room layouts, more efficient cleaning routes." Her innovation despite limited resources continually amazed him. "Tommy thinks every drawing is museum-worthy," she added with a soft laugh. "He's my biggest fan, even if I'm just doodling stick figures." Their morning routine had developed a comfortable rhythm, but today felt different, charged with unspoken possibilities. During their first break, Emma shared something unexpected. "I've been thinking about what you said about starting over," she began hesitantly. "About how sometimes losing everything can be a blessing." Michael listened intently, sensing the importance of this moment. "I was so angry when Tommy's father left," she continued. "Felt like my whole world had collapsed." Her fingers traced patterns on her coffee cup. "But now I realize, sometimes things fall apart so better things can fall together." The vulnerability in her voice touched something deep in Michael's heart. "You've built something beautiful," he said softly. "A life full of purpose and love." Emma's eyes met his, holding a mix of gratitude and something more. "It helps having people who believe in you." The moment stretched between them, full of unspoken meaning. Their quiet connection was interrupted by the daily bustle. But something had shifted like tectonic plates beneath still waters. Throughout the day, Michael found himself watching Emma more closely. The way she lit up when talking about her dreams. How she maintained her dignity despite James's constant criticism. Her genuine joy when sharing Tommy's latest adventures. As evening approached, she invited him to join them for pizza night. "Tommy's been asking about you," she explained shyly. "Says he wants to meet his mom's new friend." The invitation both thrilled and terrified him. Deepening their connection while living a lie felt increasingly wrong. Yet he couldn't bear the thought of refusing. "I'd love to," he heard himself say. Watching her face brighten made his guilt both sweeter and sharper. That evening, in Tommy's presence, he saw new sides of Emma. The way she transformed their small apartment into a castle of imagination. How? She made their modest dinner feel like a feast. Tommy's innocent questions about Mr. Marks' life tested his composure. But Emma's warm presence made everything feel right, even as he knew it couldn't last forever. Later, after Tommy was asleep, they sat on her small balcony. The city lights below seemed to hold all their unspoken hopes. "Thank you for coming tonight," Emma said softly. "It's nice not feeling alone sometimes." Michael felt his heart constrict with emotion. The truth burned in his throat, demanding release. But the moment was too precious to shatter. So instead, he simply smiled and said, "Thank you for letting me in." As he drove home that night, his two worlds seemed further apart than ever. Yet his heart had never felt more certain of its path. Emma Foster had shown him what real wealth looked like. It wasn't in his bank accounts or luxury penthouses. It was in the genuine smile of a boy sharing his pizza, in the quiet strength of a mother's love, in the trust of a woman who saw value in a man, who didn't exist except in her presence. The deception would end soon, it had to, but tonight had given him something priceless. A glimpse of the life he never knew he wanted, and the courage to reach for it, whatever the cost. Monday morning arrived with unexpected challenges that would test their growing bond. Michael entered the hotel through the staff entrance, his mind still lingering on Friday's pizza night. The memory of Tommy's laughter and Emma's warm smile felt like a dream. But reality quickly intervened in the form of James Phillips. "Jean Foster, my office now," his sharp voice cut through the morning bustle. Emma's face showed momentary concern before settling into professional calm. Inside the manager's office, the tension was palpable. "There have been complaints about inappropriate fraternization among staff," James began. His cold eyes moved between them, lingering judgmentally. "The hotel has strict policies about workplace relationships." Michael felt anger rising, but maintained Mark's humble demeanor. Emma spoke first, her voice steady despite her pale face. "Mr. Phillips, Mark, and I maintain complete professionalism at work. What we do on our own time," she began. James cut her off with a dismissive wave. "You're walking a fine line, Foster. Remember, your position here is precarious." The threat in his voice was unmistakable. Michael's fists clenched behind his back, CEO instincts fighting to surface. "As for you, Jean," James continued, "you're still on probation. Don't jeopardize your position here." They were dismissed with a warning, but the damage was done. In the hallway, Emma's composure cracked slightly. "I can't lose this job," she whispered, more to herself than to him. Michael wanted to reassure her, to reveal his true identity, to tell her James would be gone tomorrow if he wished it. Instead, he could only offer quiet S. "A port. He's just flexing his power. We haven't done anything wrong." The morning progressed with an uncomfortable distance between them. Emma focused intently on her work, avoiding personal conversation. Even their usual break-time banter felt strained. Michael watched her struggling to maintain her professional mask. Knowing he was the cause of her distress made it worse. Around noon, a new crisis emerged. A VIP guest complained about missing jewelry in their suite. James immediately focused his investigation on the housekeeping staff, particularly those who had access to the room, including Emma. The questioning was aggressive, bordering on hostile. "Where were you between 9 and 10 a.m. yesterday?" James demanded. Emma's voice remained steady, though her hands trembled slightly. "I was cleaning on the 14th floor. The logs will show that." Michael knew she was innocent. They'd been working together then. But speaking up might draw more unwanted attention. The situation grew tenser as security footage was reviewed. Emma's reputation hung by a thread as James built his case, though the evidence was circumstantial at best. Michael watched in growing anger as James seemed to enjoy her discomfort. Finally, he couldn't stay silent any longer. "I was with her the entire time," he stated firmly. "We were following the new cleaning protocols you implemented." James's eyes narrowed at his intervention. But before he could respond, the guest called again. The jewelry had been found in their car's glove compartment. Relief flooded Emma's face, but the damage to her spirit was visible. As they left the security office, she wouldn't meet his eyes. "Thank you for speaking up," she said quietly. "But maybe James is right. Maybe we should be more professional." The words hurt more than Michael expected. He watched her walk away, her shoulders tense with worry, knowing his presence in her life was becoming a liability, yet unable to imagine maintaining that professional distance. The day continued with an uncomfortable new dynamic, each interaction carefully measured, each word chosen with caution. But beneath the surface, emotions churned like storm clouds, testing the boundaries of truth, trust, and growing feelings. The afternoon unfolded like a slow-motion collision between duty and desire. Every passing moment reinforced the growing chasm between them. Emma threw herself into work with almost desperate intensity. Each room cleaned to perfection, every detail scrutinized. Michael observed her self-imposed isolation with growing concern. He recognized her behavior, the instinct to protect oneself through distance. During their mandatory team meeting, she sat across the room. The physical space between them felt like an ocean of unspoken words. James took particular pleasure in assigning them separate floors. "We need to optimize our cleaning rotations," he announced with a smirk. The cruelty of his power play was subtle, but unmistakable. Later, Michael found a moment to speak with Emma alone. "We can't let him win like this," he said softly. Emma's response cut deeper than he expected. "This isn't about winning, Mark. It's about survival." Her eyes met his, filled with a mixture of pain and pragmatism. "Tommy needs stability more than I need." She trailed off. The unfinished sentence hung between them like a physical presence. Throughout the afternoon, Michael watched her from afar. The way she maintained her gentle demeanor with guests. How she still helped newer staff members despite her own troubles. Her strength in adversity only made him admire her more. Around 3, he overheard a conversation that changed everything. James speaking to another manager on his phone. "Foster's been a problem since day one. Too independent. Time to make an example of her." Michael's blood ran cold at the calculated malice in James's voice. He realized the harassment wasn't random, it was targeted. Emma had become a symbol of everything James resented. Her integrity, her quiet leadership, her natural ability to inspire others. As the day drew to a close, Michael made a decision. He could no longer play both sides of this game. Something had to give, and soon. But first, he needed to protect Emma from James's schemes. He found her in the supply room, organizing tomorrow's carts. The fluorescent lights cast harsh shadows on her tired face. "Emma, we need to talk about James," he began. She shook her head before he could continue. "Please, Mark, don't make this harder than it needs to be. I know you mean well, but some battles aren't worth fighting." Her resignation felt like a physical blow. This wasn't the Emma he knew, the fighter, the optimist. James had succeeded in breaking something precious, and Michael Chen, despite all his power, felt utterly helpless. As Mark Zhang, he could only watch and suffer in silence. The weight of his deception growing heavier by the minute, knowing that soon everything would change, for better or worse. The truth would have to come out. The only question was, would it destroy the very thing he was trying to protect? The answer lay hidden in tomorrow's uncertain dawn, where secrets and truth would finally collide, in ways neither of them could possibly predict. The evening shift brought an unexpected catalyst that would shatter their careful distance. A luxury suite needed immediate attention after a guest's early departure. Despite James's segregation attempts, they were the only staff available. Working together in silence felt like drowning in unspoken words. Emma's movements were precise but tense, like a coiled spring. Michael noticed her hands trembling slightly as she changed the linens. Suddenly, she dropped a stack of fresh towels, scattering them across the floor. It was such a small thing, but it broke something inside her. "I can't do this anymore," she whispered, voice cracking. Michael moved toward her instinctively, but she stepped back. "Don't," she said, holding up a hand. "Please just don't." Tears threatened to spill from her eyes as she continued. "Do you know what this job means to me? What I've built here?" Her words came faster now, like a dam breaking. "I've worked so hard to be more than just another housekeeper. To show Tommy that dignity matters more than position." Michael stood frozen, his heart breaking at her pain. "And then you came along," she continued softly, "making me feel like maybe I deserve more, making me dream about impossible things." Her laugh was bitter, unlike anything he'd heard from her before. But James is right. Dreams don't pay bills. And single mothers can't afford to take risks. She bent to gather the fallen towels, her movements jerky. Michael knelt beside her, their hands brushing briefly. "Emma, please listen," he began. But she cut him off, standing abruptly. "No, Mark. We both know this has to stop. Whatever this is, whatever I thought it might be, it's not worth losing everything I've worked for." The truth burned in Michael's throat, demanding release. But before he could speak, their radios crackled. Another crisis, another demand for immediate attention. Emma quickly wiped her eyes, straightened her uniform. The professional mask slipped back into place. But something had fundamentally changed between them. The air felt charged with unspoken truths and buried feelings. As they parted ways to handle separate tasks, Michael realized time was running out. His deception was causing more harm than good, and Emma's pain was the price of his cowardice. Tomorrow would have to bring change, because watching her break under the weight of false choices was more than his heart could bear. The question was, would the truth heal or destroy? Only tomorrow's revelation would tell. But one thing was certain: nothing would ever be the same for either of them after tonight's quiet breakdown. In a luxury suite that felt more like a confession booth, where dreams and reality collided in the gathering dark. The next morning brought a heaviness that seemed to permeate every corner of the hotel. Michael arrived earlier than usual, hoping to catch Emma before their shift. Instead, he found her absence note posted in the staff room. "Personal day. Tommy's school emergency." His heart sank, knowing the real reason behind her absence. James strutted through the morning meeting, particularly smug. "Foster's absence is exactly why we maintain professional boundaries," he announced. "Personal entanglements lead to unreliability." Michael felt the familiar rage building, CEO instinct screaming for action. But Mark Zhang could only clench his jaw and endure. Throughout the morning, he found himself pausing at places that held their memories. The break room where they'd shared countless coffees. The supply closet where she'd taught him proper folding techniques. The presidential suite where she'd first shown him her notebook of dreams. Each space felt emptier without her presence. Around noon, he overheard a conversation that chilled his blood. James speaking to HR on his phone, voice dripping with satisfaction. "Yes, I'm recommending termination. Pattern of unprofessional behavior. The incident reports are already prepared." Michael realized with crystal clarity, tomorrow would be too late. The choice between his deception and Emma's future was no choice at all. During his lunch break, he made two crucial phone calls. One to his executive assistant, setting specific plans in motion. Another to his lawyer, ensuring everything was legally sound. By afternoon, the pieces were in place for tomorrow's revelation. But tonight, he had one more role to play as Mark Zhang. He found himself driving to Emma's apartment after his shift. The lights were on, soft shadows moving behind curtained windows. His knock was gentle, uncertain. When she opened the door, Tommy's voice drifted from inside. "Mom, is that Mr. Mark?" Emma's face showed surprise, then resignation. "Tommy, homework first, remember?" She called back. Then to Michael, "You shouldn't be here." But her voice lacked its earlier conviction. "5 minutes," he pleaded. "That's all I ask." She hesitated, then stepped onto the small porch. The evening air carried the scent of her simple shampoo. "James is planning to terminate you," he said without preamble. Her sharp intake of breath confirmed her worst fears. "He's fabricating a case against you. But I won't let it happen." "How can you stop it?" she asked, voice barely a whisper. Michael took a deep breath, knowing everything would change. "Because tomorrow, everyone will learn who I really am. And James will learn what real consequences feel like." Emma's confusion was visible in the porch light. "What are you talking about, Mark?" "Tomorrow," he promised. "Just please come to work tomorrow. Trust me one last time." As he turned to leave, her voice stopped him. "Why do you care so much?" The question deserved complete honesty. "Because you showed me what real integrity looks like. And tomorrow, I'll finally show you who I really am." He left her standing on the porch, questions in her eyes, knowing tomorrow would either destroy everything or finally bridge the gap between Michael Chen and Mark Zhang, between deception and truth. between what he was and what she'd helped him become. The stage was set for revelation, and nothing would ever be the same again. For either of them. After tomorrow's dawn. Dawn broke over the city skyline as Michael Chen prepared for the most important day of his life. Gone were Mark Zhang's worn uniforms and humble demeanor. Today, he would reclaim his identity in a tailored suit that felt strangely foreign. The executive elevator hummed as it carried him to his private office. Security cameras tracked his unusual early arrival. His executive assistant Sarah waited with a stack of prepared documents. "Everything's arranged as requested, Mr. Chen. The board members will arrive at 9 a.m. And James Phillips is scheduled for his regular manager's meeting at 10. Michael nodded, his mind already racing ahead to Emma's usual start time. "Have legal confirmed everything?" Sarah's efficient nod reassured him. "All documentation of Mr. Phillips' misconduct is prepared. The new employee benefit packages are ready for immediate implementation. And the promotion paperwork for Ms. Foster is complete." The mention of Emma's name made his heart clench. Would she ever forgive him for the deception? Could any explanation justify the lies? He stood at his office window, watching the morning staff arrive. Each familiar face now carried new meaning. The security guard who always shared his lunch with newer employees. The maintenance worker who fixed things off the clock. The housekeeping staff who arrived early to help each other prep. All people he'd never truly seen before Emma taught him to look. At 8:15, he spotted her approaching the employee entrance. Even from 18 floors up, he recognized her determined walk. The weight of what was to come pressed heavily on his shoulders. His phone buzzed. First board members arriving early. "Send them to the main conference room," he instructed Sarah. "And make sure James doesn't get wind of this yet." The pieces were in place for the confrontation to come. Now he just had to find the courage to face the consequences of pretending to be someone he wasn't, while becoming someone he never knew he could be. The clock ticked toward the moment of truth, when lies would give way to honesty, and Michael Chen would discover if love could survive the shattering of trust in the name of building something true. The stage was set for revelation, and redemption hung in the balance. As morning light flooded his office, illuminating the path toward truth, or possibly toward loss, of everything that truly mattered in this game of hearts and identities. The hotel's morning bustle felt surreal from Michael's executive vantage point. At 8:30, Sarah announced the first critical moment of his carefully orchestrated plan. The entire housekeeping staff is gathered for morning briefing, as requested. Michael straightened his tie, a gesture that felt both familiar and foreign. "And James Phillips?" "Already there, sir," making his usual announcements. The slight pause in her voice spoke volumes. Through the security feed, Michael watched the scene unfold in the staff room. Emma stood near the back, her posture tense but dignified. James commanded the front, his usual imperious manner on full display. "Recent events have highlighted the need for stricter protocols," he began. Michael's jaw tightened as he watched James single out Emma with his gaze. Some people seemed to have forgotten their proper place in this organization. The gathered staff shifted uncomfortably, many shooting sympathetic glances at Emma. It was time. Michael adjusted his cuffs and headed for the service elevator, the same one he'd used countless times as Mark Zhang. As he descended, memories flooded his mind. Emma's first warm welcome when he arrived as a new hire. Their shared breaks over budget coffee and honest conversations. The way she taught him to fold towels with precise, caring movements. The elevator doors opened to the service corridor. He could hear James's voice growing louder, more condescending. "Furthermore, I'm implementing immediate disciplinary actions." Michael's footsteps echoed as he approached the staff room. The familiar squeaking of his Italian leather shoes replaced the quiet shuffle of Mark's worn work boots. He paused at the doorway, taking in the scene before him. James's back was turned, but he could see Emma's face clearly. The moment she spotted him, her eyes widened in recognition and confusion. The suit, the posture, the authority he naturally carried. All at odds with the Mark Zhang she thought she knew. "Mr. Phillips." Michael's voice cut through the room like a blade. James spun around, his face cycling through shock, confusion, and fear. "Mr. Chen, I wasn't expecting." "Clearly," Michael interrupted, his gaze sweeping the room. landing finally, inevitably, on Emma's pale face. In her eyes, he saw the moment understanding dawned, the pieces falling into place like shards of broken glass, each revelation cutting deeper than the last. The man she knew was Mark Zhang, standing before her as Michael Chen, owner of the hotel empire she served. And nothing would ever be the same again. The silence in the staff room was deafening, thick with unspoken accusations. Michael took measured steps into the space, each footfall echoing with authority. "Ladies and gentlemen, I owe you all an explanation," he began. His voice carried the weight of weeks of deception and newfound understanding. James attempted to regain control of the situation. "Mr. Chen, I was just addressing some disciplinary concerns." "No, James. You were abusing your power." Again, the sharpness in Michael's tone made the manager physically step back. Emma hadn't moved, her face a mask of conflicting emotions. Betrayal, confusion, and something deeper warred in her eyes. "For the past month, I've worked alongside you as Mark Zhang." The collective gasp from the staff punctuated his confession. "I wanted to understand the true heart of this hotel." What I discovered was both inspiring and deeply troubling. His gaze swept the room, acknowledging each person he'd worked with. "I found dedication, resilience, and humanity in this staff. And I found corruption, abuse, and discrimination in its management." James's face had turned an alarming shade of red. "Mr. Chen, I can explain." "Your explanations won't be necessary, James. You're terminated." The words fell like hammer blows in the silent room. "Security will escort you to clear out your office." As if on cue, two security officers appeared at the door. James's exit was inglorious, his final glare promising retribution. But Michael's attention had already returned to Emma. She stood perfectly still, her professional mask firmly in place. Only the slight trembling of her hands betrayed her emotion. "The changes starting today go far beyond removing Mr. Phillips." Michael continued addressing the staff, but his words were for her. "New healthcare benefits, educational assistance programs, revised scheduling policies, improved working conditions. The changes you deserve but were afraid to demand." The staff's excitement grew with each announcement, but Emma's silence spoke louder than any reaction. When she finally turned to leave, Michael felt panic rise. "Emma, please." "Mr. Chen." She cut him off, her voice professionally distant. "Will that be all?" The formality was worse than anger would have been. Around them, the staff buzzed with excitement over the changes. But in that moment, Michael Chen realized, sometimes the price of doing right could be losing what matters most, and no amount of power or privilege could guarantee forgiveness for broken trust. The truth was out, but the real battle was only just beginning. The afternoon that followed Michael's revelation unfolded like a carefully orchestrated symphony of chaos. His executive office felt more like a confessional booth as he met with department heads. Each meeting brought new revelations of systemic issues he'd witnessed firsthand. The board members, initially skeptical, fell silent as he presented his findings. "Gentlemen, I've seen our hotel not from above, but from within." His voice carried the weight of countless early mornings and aching muscles. "We've built our success on the backs of people we never truly saw." The presentation continued with precise details only a housekeeper would know. The broken staff elevator that forced elderly workers to climb 18 flights. The inadequate cleaning supplies that made every task twice as difficult. The impossible scheduling that separated parents from sick children. Through it all, Emma's absence echoed like a physical pain. She disappeared after the morning's revelation, taking personal time. Her empty cart stood in the service corridor, a silent accusation. By evening, Michael had implemented more changes than in his previous 5 years as CEO. Immediate wage increases across all service departments. Comprehensive healthcare coverage for all employees. Educational assistance programs and career development paths. But none of it filled the void left by one woman's shattered trust. Around midnight, he found himself in the staff break room, the same space where he'd first shared coffee with Emma. Her small notebook lay forgotten on a shelf. He opened it carefully, like a sacred text. Page after page of innovative solutions to daily challenges. Detailed sketches for more efficient room layouts. notes about guest preferences and special needs. And in the margins, small doodles of superheroes, clearly drawn by Tommy's inexpert hand. The sight broke something inside him. Without thinking, he drove to her apartment. The windows were dark except for a small kitchen light. He sat in his car, remembering their pizza night. The way Tommy's laughter had filled the small space. How Emma's eyes sparkled when she felt truly seen. Finally, he took out his phone and typed, "The truth is, I became more myself as Mark Zhang than I ever was as Michael Chen, because you taught me what really matters." He waited, watching the message status. Read. No response. Another message. "I know I betrayed your trust, but everything else was real, especially how I feel about you and Tommy." Minutes passed like hours. Finally, 3 dots appeared. Her response was simple but devastating. "Some things can't be fixed with money or power, Mr. Chen. Some trust, once broken, stays broken." He sat there until dawn, watching her window, knowing that sometimes the hardest truths are the ones we learn too late. That love, real love, requires courage, not just in the revelation, but in the everyday choice to be honest. From the very beginning, tomorrow would bring new challenges. But tonight, Michael Chen learned that all his power and wealth couldn't buy back what mattered most: the trust of a woman who'd taught him how to be human again. The dawn after Michael's revelation brought a different kind of silence to the Chen Hotel. News of the owner's undercover mission spread like wildfire through every department. But the real story unfolded in the quiet spaces between headlines. In his office, Michael stared at Emma's notebook, still on his desk, each page filled with the dreams and dedication he'd come to admire. Sarah entered with the morning reports, her usual efficiency tempered with concern. "The staff response to the changes has been overwhelmingly positive, sir. But Ms. Foster has requested a transfer to our Seattle property." The words hit him like a physical blow. "When?" he managed to ask, his voice carefully controlled. "She's given 2 weeks' notice, citing personal reasons." Michael closed Emma's notebook, his decision already forming. "Cancel my meetings for the day. All of them." He had 2 weeks to prove that Michael Chen could be worthy of the trust Emma had given to Mark Zhang. The transformation began with small, deliberate actions. He started in housekeeping, where his journey had begun. Not as a boss, as a colleague who remembered the weight of that card. "Mr. Chen, you don't have to," a young housekeeper began. "Please call me Michael," he interrupted, helping her with linens. "And yes, I do have to. More importantly, I want to." Throughout the morning, he worked alongside his staff, not for show or publicity, but with genuine understanding. Because Emma had taught him the dignity in every task. He implemented changes based on her notebook suggestions. Adjustable cleaning card designs for different body heights. Modified room layouts to reduce physical strain. Enhanced break room facilities with proper rest areas. Each change echoed with her influence, even though she remained conspicuously absent. During lunch, he sat in the staff cafeteria, the same table where he'd first met Emma, listening to stories, concerns, and dreams, just as she had taught him to do. Because sometimes the biggest changes start with the smallest acts of attention, and redemption begins, not with grand gestures, but with humble recognition of the truth we try to hide, even from ourselves. Each passing day brought new lessons in humility and determination for Michael Chen. By the end of the first week, subtle changes began appearing throughout the hotel. Fresh coffee in the staff room, the good kind Emma had always wished for. New ergonomic mats in the laundry area to ease tired feet. Properly functioning radios that didn't crackle and cut out. Small changes that spoke volumes about attention to detail. In the mornings, he'd catch glimpses of Emma from afar. She maintained her professionalism, performing her duties with grace. But her usual warmth had been replaced by careful distance. The staff watched their interactions with barely concealed interest. The powerful CEO, who kept finding reasons to be intersection. The quiet housekeeper, who maintained her dignified reserve. During a particularly busy afternoon, crisis struck. A pipe burst on the 14th floor, flooding 3 luxury suites. Without hesitation, Michael rolled up his sleeves and joined the cleanup crew. "Mr. Chen, please," the maintenance supervisor protested. "You don't understand," Michael replied, grabbing a mop. I actually do. I've done this before. He caught Emma watching him as he worked alongside the staff. Her expression unreadable, but something flickered in her eyes. Recognition, perhaps, of the Mark Zhang she'd known. Still there, beneath the expensive suit and CEO title. Later that day, he found a note in his office. Tommy asked about you yesterday. Just 7 words, but they felt like hope. He responded carefully, respectfully. I miss our pizza nights. Both of you. Hours passed before her reply came. He misses the superhero stories. Michael's heart clenched at the memory. Sitting on their small couch, inventing tales of courage. While Tommy drew pictures in Emma's notebook, his response came from the heart. The best superhero I know wears a housekeeper's uniform and teaches her son about dignity and strength every day. The message showed as read, but no reply came. Yet somehow, the silence felt different now. Less like a wall, more like a door. Not open, but perhaps not locked forever. Because redemption isn't earned in grand gestures, but in small moments of genuine truth. And Michael Chen was finally learning that the path back to trust is paved with patient understanding and the courage to remain present, even when presence alone feels insufficient. The second week of Michael's redemption journey brought unexpected opportunities for growth. A high-profile wedding booking threatened to overwhelm the housekeeping department. We need all hands on deck, the new manager announced during morning briefing. Michael noticed Emma's subtle shift as she studied the preparation checklist. Her mind already working through the logistical challenges he knew she loved solving. Without fanfare, he picked up a copy of the same checklist. I'd like to help coordinate this, he announced to the surprised staff. If the team is willing to have me. His eyes met Emma's briefly across the room. For a moment, he saw a flicker of the partnership they once shared. The wedding preparations became a test of his commitment. Early mornings arranging thousands of fresh flowers. Late nights ensuring every detail met their exacting standards. Throughout it all, he found himself gravitating toward Emma's methodology. Her efficient room preparation sequences. The small touches she always added to make spaces feel special. During a particularly challenging setup, their paths finally crossed directly, both reaching for the same vase of roses. Sorry, he stepped back, respecting her space. But Emma paused, considering him with new eyes. You're doing it wrong, she said softly. The roses need to be angled to catch the morning light. It was the longest sentence she'd spoken to him in days. He watched carefully as she demonstrated the proper technique. Her hands moving with practiced grace and artistic precision. Like this, he asked, adjusting another arrangement. Better, she nodded, the ghost of a smile touching her lips. For a brief moment, they worked in synchronization, the familiar rhythm of their partnership whispering beneath the surface, until a delivery interruption shattered the fragile peace. But something had shifted in that quiet moment, a crack in the wall of silence between them. Later that night, as they surveyed the finished ballroom, Emma spoke again, her voice barely audible. You've changed. The words hung in the air between them. Not changed, he corrected gently. Just finally becoming who I should have been all along. She studied him for a long moment. The man I knew as Mark. He was real, Michael finished. He still is. He's just trying to be worthy of the tea. Rusty lost. Emma's response was quiet but clear. Trust isn't earned in grand gestures. I know, he replied. It's earned in small moments of truth. Like arranging roses to catch the morning light. This time her smile was real if fleeting, progress measured not in words, but in the small spaces between them, where truth and forgiveness might someday meet. The wedding day arrived with golden morning light streaming through the hotel's grand windows. As the early hours unfolded, Michael found himself drawn to the quiet precision of pre-event preparation. Emma's influence was visible in every perfectly arranged detail. The way light caught crystal centerpieces at just the right angle. How each place setting told its own story of elegance and care. He watched her direct the final touches with quiet authority. The staff naturally gravitating to her leadership, following her vision without need for commands. A text message interrupted his observations. Tommy has a school presentation today. Michael's heart skipped at this unexpected sharing of information. About superheroes? He replied, remembering their old conversations. About real-life heroes. He's talking about hotel workers. The message carried layers of meaning that squeezed his chest. I'm sorry I'll miss it, he responded honestly. Her reply came surprisingly quick. It's at 2 p.m., Roosevelt Elementary. The invitation, subtle but clear, hung in the air like hope. Michael glanced at his schedule, already knowing his choice. Board meetings could wait. Some moments mattered more. At precisely 1:45 p.m., he slipped into the school auditorium. Emma's surprised smile when she spotted him felt like sunrise. Tommy's face lit up as he began his presentation. My mom makes magic happen every day. His innocent words painted pictures of midnight cleanings, of careful attention to details others never notice, of dignity in service and pride in work well done. Michael watched Emma's eyes shine with tears and pride, remembering how she taught him these same lessons, through example rather than words. After the presentation, Tommy ran to them both. Mr. Chen, his excitement bubbled over. Did you like my speech about Mom being a superhero? Michael knelt to the boy's level, just as he used to. Your mom taught me what real heroes look like, Tommy. His eyes met Emma's over their shared smile. Later, as they walked to their cars, Emma spoke softly. You didn't have to come. Yes, Michael replied. I did. Because Mark Jean would have been here. And he's the best part of who I am. Emma studied him for a long moment. The transfer request. She began. I was running away. And now, he asked, heart in his throat. Now I think maybe there's another way. To rebuild what broke. If we start with truth this time. Michael felt hope bloom in his chest. Pizza night, he suggested carefully. Her smile, small but real, felt like forgiveness. Pizza night, she agreed. Because sometimes redemption comes, not in grand gestures or corporate changes, but in small moments of chosen truth, in school presentations about real heroes, and in the courage to try again, starting with pizza and trust, one slice of truth at a time. The journey of rebuilding trust began with a simple pizza dinner, but its impact would ripple far beyond that evening. Michael arrived at Emma's apartment carrying not just pizza, but a weight of hope and uncertainty. Tommy opened the door before he could knock, enthusiasm radiating from his small frame. Mom, Mr. Chen is here, he announced, titles tumbling together in childish excitement. Emma appeared behind him, her smile cautious but genuine. You remembered the pineapple, she noted, seeing the boxes in his hands. Some things shouldn't change, he replied softly. The apartment felt different now, smaller somehow from Michael Chen's perspective, yet infinitely more precious than his penthouse ever had been. Tommy's superhero drawings still decorated the refrigerator, but now they included a new character, a hotel worker in a cape. As they settled around the small kitchen table, the familiar routine felt both comfortable and strange. Can you tell superhero stories again? Tommy asked between bites. Michael glanced at Emma, seeking permission. Her slight nod carried the weight of second chances. Actually, he began, I know a story about a real superhero. Someone who taught a very lost man how to see the world differently. Emma's hands stilled on her plate, recognizing the story's direction. She didn't wear a cape or fly through the sky, but she had the greatest superpower of all. Tommy leaned forward, pizza forgotten. What was it? Michael's eyes met Emma's across the table. She could see the good in people, even when they couldn't see it themselves. The evening unfolded with a gentler rhythm than their previous gatherings, each moment carrying the precious weight of renewal. When Tommy finally went to bed, Emma and Michael sat on the small balcony. The city lights below seemed to hold their silence in gentle embrace. I've been thinking, Emma began carefully, about what you said about starting with truth. Michael waited, heart thundering beneath his casual pose. I'm not ready to forgive everything, she continued, but I'm ready to try understanding. Her words offered a foundation to build upon. That's more than I deserve, he admitted. Maybe, she agreed, but it's what Tommy deserves. And maybe it's what we all need. The night air carried possibilities between them. Not promises, not yet, but hope, fragile and precious. Like trust rebuilt one moment at a time, one pizza night at a time, one truth at a time, until forgiveness might finally bridge the gap between who they were and who they could become, together. In the days following their pizza night reunion, Michael and Emma began a delicate dance of rebuilding. Each morning brought small moments of intentional connection. A coffee left on her cart, just the way she liked it. A note of thanks for her input on new housekeeping protocols. Brief conversations that felt like stepping stones across a wide river. Emma, too, began offering her own careful gestures of acceptance, sharing Tommy's latest superhero drawings via text, staying a few minutes after shift to discuss operational improvements. Small signs that the wall between them was slowly crumbling. One particularly busy afternoon, crisis struck the hotel. A burst pipe threatened an important charity gala scheduled for that evening. Without hesitation, Emma took charge of the situation. "We'll need to relocate to the West Ballroom," she announced decisively. Michael watched in admiration as she coordinated the massive undertaking. Her quiet authority drawing the best from every staff member. Her innovative solutions turning chaos into opportunity. "You should be running this place," he said softly, helping move centerpieces. Emma paused, considering his words with new perspective. "Maybe some parts of it," she replied thoughtfully. That evening, after the successful event, they shared a quiet moment. "I've been thinking about your offer," Emma began. "The management training program." Michael held his breath, hope rising in his chest. "Tommy needs stability," she continued. "And I need to spread your wings," he finished gently. Their eyes met in the dim ballroom light. "Yes," she whispered, "but this time on my own terms." "Always on your terms," he promised. Because he'd learned that real love, whether personal or professional, means supporting someone's flight without trying to control their direction. And sometimes the strongest bridges are built by letting go of who we thought we needed to become who we were meant to be, together or apart, but always moving forward, with truth as their compass and trust as their foundation. The transformation within the Chen Hotel continued like ripples spreading across still water. Emma's decision to enter management training sparked a wave of positive change. Her first presentation to the executive team left them stunned. "These innovations could revolutionize our entire service model," the COO admitted. Michael watched from the back of the room, chest swelling with pride. She'd taken everything she'd learned from the ground up. The daily struggles of housekeeping staff, the hidden inefficiencies in current protocols, the human cost of corporate blindness, and transformed them into solutions that honored both profit and people. Tommy adapted to his mother's new schedule with characteristic resilience. "Mom's going to be a hotel superhero boss," he announced proudly at school. The other children might not have understood, but Michael, overhearing during a school pickup, felt his heart expand. Emma's leadership style emerged as uniquely her own. Not the traditional corporate authority they'd known, but something more powerful: leadership through understanding. She still worked alongside housekeeping staff during rush periods. "A good leader never forgets where they came from," she explained. Michael recognized his own lessons reflected back at him. Their professional relationship evolved into something remarkable. Partners in transforming the hotel's culture, each bringing their unique perspective to the table. During late-night strategy sessions, they found themselves sharing dreams bigger than either had dared voice before. "What if we created a mentorship program?" Emma suggested one evening, for single parents in the hospitality industry. The passion in her voice reminded Michael of why he'd fallen in love with both the woman and the vision she represented. But he maintained professional boundaries carefully, letting her soar on her own merits, supporting without overshadowing. Because true love, he learned, means celebrating someone's growth, even if it takes them in unexpected directions. One evening, after a particularly successful board meeting, Emma found him in his office, staring at the city lights. "Thank you," she said simply. "For what?" he asked, turning to face her. "For letting me find my own way, even when you could have made it easier." The moment stretched between them, heavy with possibility. "You never needed my help," he replied softly. "You just needed someone to remove the barriers." Her smile held the warmth he remembered from their first meetings. Maybe we needed each other to remember who we could become. And in that quiet moment of acknowledgement, both recognized how far they'd come, from deception to truth, from broken trust to something stronger, built on mutual respect and understanding. the foundation for whatever might come next. In their shared journey of transformation, the evening of Emma's official promotion to operations director brought everything full circle. The hotel staff gathered in the grand ballroom, transformed by her vision. Not the usual corporate celebration, but a family gathering that included everyone from housekeeping to executives. Tommy sat in the front row, wearing his best suit and superhero tie. "Mom says I'm her good luck charm," he announced proudly to anyone who'd listen. Michael stood at the podium, his heart full as he prepared to make the announcement. The faces before him represented everything they'd built together. A community rather than just a workplace. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice carrying emotion. "Tonight we celebrate not just a promotion, but the embodiment of everything this hotel should be." Emma stood gracefully as he called her forward, her simple elegance more striking than any executive suit, her eyes bright with pride and accomplishment. "Under Emma Foster's leadership," Michael continued, "our employee satisfaction has reached record highs. Our service ratings have never been better. But more importantly, we've become a family." The applause that followed came from genuine appreciation. Everyone in the room had experienced Emma's impact firsthand. After the ceremony, they found a quiet moment away from the crowd, standing on the same balcony where they'd first shared dreams. "Remember when you used to clean these windows?" she teased gently. "Best window cleaner you ever had," he replied with a smile. The ease between them felt natural now, built on mutual respect and shared purpose. "Tommy asked me something interesting today," Emma said softly. "He wanted to know if superheroes can fall in love." Michael's heart skipped at her words. "What did you tell him?" "I told him that real heroes are human first, and humans need love to be their best selves." Their eyes met in the gentle evening light. Years of history reflected in that single glance. The deception that had brought them together, the truth that had torn them apart, and the stronger foundation they'd built from those ruins. "Emma," Michael began, his voice soft but certain, "we've built something beautiful here, but I find myself wanting more." She turned to face him fully. "More? A real family," he replied. "The three of us. If you'll trust me one more time." Her smile held all the warmth of their first meetings. "I think we're past trust now, Michael. We're at love." And as they stood there, city lights twinkling below, both knew they'd found something rare and precious. A love built not on fantasy or deception, but on the solid ground of truth and growth, where two people had helped each other become better versions of themselves, through challenge and change, through forgiveness and understanding, until they found themselves exactly where they needed to be, together, stronger for the journey that brought them here, ready to write their next chapter, not as CEO and employee, but as partners in every sense, building a future bright with possibility and rich with the love they'd earned, one truth at a time,